Celtic fans viewing this fine Saturday morning, Sunday, whatever day it is. It's Saturday. It's Saturday. There's no Celtic game today. We do play tomorrow, which means we've got a bit of a free-for-all day today. But Brendan Rodgers, last night, well, yesterday in the press conference, it's fair to say that Brendan Rodgers. What's that thing you've just put up as? It's nothing. It's just about. Stephen, don't worry about it. It's nothing. I turned off subscriber only mode so that anyone could chat this morning, not just subscribers. So it is just about subscribers. So don't worry about it. So anyone can chat. So feel free to join the chat this morning if you're not a subscriber. So yeah, Brendan Rodgers yesterday, which he had a fantastic press conference, and the downside of it is Greg Taylor's injured, Cameron Carter-Vickers is still injured, the exact same as last season, when we had defensive woes at the beginning of the season. We've now got defensive woes. We're hitting about the quarter, well, we're not yet the quarter-way mark into the season. When we get into the end of October, you generally are. But it's not ideal. But Brendan Rodgers hit back in style yesterday. And Brendan Rodgers did hit back. And there's a couple of other things I want to talk about. Because the media in Scotland like nothing better to hit back at Celtic. And there's quite a few ones that I want to pick out. Richard Gordon, remember him? Richard Gordon having a dig up in Aberdeen, having a dig at Celtic. The Daily Record are having a dig at Celtic, and then they're also talking about that Rangers are going backwards under Clement. Rangers have been coming forward that many times that we've forgotten that they're coming. They came once and that was it. Keith Winess, remember him, another ex-Aberdeen CEO. He's having a dig at Celtic as well. But before we talk about Brendan Rodgers, we're going to talk about the Scottish media and the media in general just trying to have a dig at Celtic. Now, he's talking about Keith Winess. He was the CEO at Aberdeen from 2000 to 2004. And he was also, I don't know even what he does. He runs a football consultancy, allegedly now. But he's always talking about Celtic. If you remember last month, Celtic announced that St Johnstone announced that they were going to reduce the allocation just before the Celtic game in an attempt to make St Johnstone's ground a true fortress. How did that work out? They had 3,000 empty seats. Yep. St Johnstone fans didn't make it a fortress. They had 3,000 empty seats. And with loads of Celtic fans standing outside the ground that day hoping to try and buy tickets, it just didn't work out. Celtic are no stranger to having attendances reduced with the allocations. Relegated Livingston were the only club that offered, they offered 7,200 odd back in March because they knew that we're going down and they needed the money, and making up the majority of their 9,000 plus capacity. It's not an ideal situation, but Keith Winess said, he says, it's a situation as a CEO at Aberdeen when we could have filled our stadium. There was a situation where we could have filled our stadium with more Rangers and Celtic fans than you can your own. Well, that's Scottish football for you. Everyone's asked the question about potential revenue, but the answer is always no. The home fans want to try and give their team the best chance possible by keeping them their normal away allocation. Keith Winess is moaning about ticket prices and an attempt to try and have a dig at Scotland. He goes on to say, when attempting to take money, but you've got to give your supporters the best voice you can to support them, it's a difficult choice, but understand it. We want to see full stadiums. See if Scottish football was to reduce. I think that Scottish football is vastly overpriced. I could went. There's a game that I was going to go to here, and it was €5. €5 to get into a game of football, and the stadium was full. And it was a stadium that England and Scotland have both played at. Both Scotland and England have played in Alicante Stadium. It's a 29,000 seater stadium. €5 to get in, just so they make sure that they fill the stadium. Scotland, they want to charge 25 quid plus and whatever to get into a game of football. People can't afford that. People can't afford that. It's no longer as a working man's game, and that's why they're not getting the stadiums full. That's why young families aren't going to St Johnstone, because it's too expensive. It's a simple fact as that. And the reason I'm talking about St Johnstone is St Johnstone is the latest one that reduced their allocation to Celtic. But Keith Winus has just been having a good old moan, saying that he can understand why teams allow Celtic and Rangers fans in big numbers just to make money, but they need to stop it. They need to stop the big allocations. And he also says that clubs are quite right to put the prices up when Celtic Rangers come calling. You can't put the prices up for tickets when the big two come calling, as they say. Well, it's not a big two because we're part of nothing. It's just Celtic on their own. You can't put their prices up and then expect people not to moan about it, but then not keep your prices low. Anyway, Keith Winus is just having a moan on some podcast about Celtic and ticket controversy. It's funny how people try and get away from Scottish football and then they do everything that they can to try and get back in and talk about it. And Richard Gordon also having a dig at Celtic. Richard Gordon says, Celtic's truly depressing Champions League stats prove Scotland is a Europa League nation. The humbling of Dortmund showed Celtic must be more pragmatic on their travels, but the Hoops' overall numbers paint a miserable picture about our game's standing in Europe. The game's... This is hilarious. Going on about having to dig at Celtic are shite. What about the teams that go into Europe on a yearly basis, and only get one game, a wee midweek game in July? One morning in July, I was fucking going on a summer holiday, and that's it. That's your summer. You know what I mean? There's other teams every year go into Europe and get completely humbled, and they get the one trip. That's all right. It's St Johnstone, it's Aberdeen. Aberdeen have done all right recently, but there's lots of teams out there that never make it into August. They don't even make it into August to play European football. But nothing's said about them. Let's have a dig at Celtic. Let's just have a dig at Celtic and see when the media does that. The Celtic fans fight back. And we do fight back in... No singing, Baz, it's too early. It is too early, but it is all about the fact that the Scottish media are having a right go at Celtic and blaming Celtic for all their woes in European football after one result. And I just wish they would do the same with other teams. But when other teams go into Europe in their August, in their July, because they don't even get to August, do they? The majority of any Scottish teams that go into Europe, they don't get into a game in August. They have a wee soiree in July, and they have their, hey, we're in Europe. Woo, we're in Europe. Who can order in French? Who can speak Spanish today? You know what I mean? It's like, hey, fucking brilliant. Talk about Scotland national team and their woeful results in Europe. If Clark was an SPFL manager, and there's the thing, if Clark was an SPFL manager and he was to go 12 games unbeaten, he wouldn't be in a job. But it's fine, it's Clarky. The Tartan Army love him. It's Clarky, the Tartan Army love him. Fucking Tartan Army. It was started. Anyway, let's jump into the comment section. And then we'll get on to some Celtic news. Stephen Johnson's in the house. Sceneries is coming in from London. Pete Rennie. Morning, Baz. Morning to you, Pete. And then next up was Carly's in the house. And Lucianne's in the house. Morning. Jim F's in the house. Morning. To Jim. Diane's in the house. Morning. Sean's in the house. Morning to Stephen. Peter Larkin's in the house. Top of the morning. Baz. Thomas is in the house. Morning. Stephen Johnson says... 1970, Rab BS. Hail, Baz. The Scottish media can't say anything about Celtic. Don't even give them airtime. You've got to give them airtime because you've got to show how ridiculous and one-sided they are. And you have to stand up for Celtic at the end of the day. And you've got to fight back. Because ever since the 1990s and the way that the Scottish media lapped up the succulent lamb of David Murray's meal times at Ibrox, and had digs at Celtic on an ongoing basis, and it doesn't stop, you have to call it out. And you have to call it out. It's as simple as that. You have to call the media out. If you don't call the media out, they just get away with it. They get away with it. So that's saying don't give them air. I can understand what you're saying, Big Rab. I can understand what you're saying. Don't give them airtime. But you have to. You have to, because if you don't pull them up about it, right, they're just going to keep on doing the same thing again and again, which they have done and which they do. And I don't see anybody else really calling them out. I don't watch a lot of Celtic channels, but you have to call them out, and it's our fan base do call them out. So don't give them airtime. I never usually give them airtime, but you've got to call them out at times like that. The negativity aiming at Celtic to try and crush Celtic and to try and stop what we're doing on a domestic level, and that's all it's aimed at. That's all it's aimed at. Is to try and get into the mindset of the players, and trying to turn the fans against the team. It's a kind of reverse psychology thing that they're trying to do, and it's like hit Celtic with this negativity, so it maybe gets the fans in turmoil. So you've got to call them out for it. Because, like I said, there's many teams on a yearly basis that have a wee soiree into Europe and do absolutely nothing. The Scotland manager has lost something like 12 games in a row. If that was an SPFL manager, he would have been chased out the door. But because it's Clarkey and the Tartan Army like him and he's doing great things, he got us to 2 tournaments. Woo! It's all fine. The Scottish media aren't turning on Clark, are they? No. But Brendan Rodgers lose one game, 7-1. And it's all hell breaks loose. It's like, oh, wait a minute, you're shite. Yeah, you're fucking really shite, aren't you? You're not just shite, you're really shite. I don't see them saying that about Clark. Clark, you're a shite manager. And he does play defensive. He plays the way that they were all talking that Brendan Rodgers needs to play. Clark plays really defensive football. So it's do you want that? Do you want the Clark version of football at Celtic? There's a poll. Would you rather Clark or Brendan as manager? Poll. Two cents of that. Two seconds. And there we go with the poll. This will be interesting. Do you want the defensive style of football as manager? Who would you rather as Celtic manager? Rodgers, who gets slated by the media for losing one game in Europe, absolutely slated, or would you rather Stevie Clark, Mr. Nice guy, reliable, always there, gets you into 2 tournaments now and again, and gets beat 12 games in a row, playing a defensive style of football? Simple. If he was an SPFL manager losing 12 games, he'd have been chased out of Celtic. Could you imagine any Celtic manager losing 12 games in a row? Never. He would get to 4 and that would be it. I'd be like, oh, well, wait a minute here, something's bad happening. Poof, you're off. This will be an interesting one to see if Stevie Clark gets any votes. Let's see, we've got an open poll this morning. It is an open. Who would you rather as Celtic manager, Brendan Rodgers or Stevie Clark? Everyone's been talking about defensive style of football in Europe. The media this morning are having a field day with Celtic in Europe and having digs at Celtic left, right and centre, and I'm calling them out for it because Stevie Clark's lost 12 games in a row. He was absolutely woeful at the Euros with Scotland. Clueless, some would say, in the Euros in Scotland. Played a defensive style of football, but nothing said about it. And I'm just backing up Brendan Rodgers, and I'm backing the Celtic board, and I'm backing the Celtic fans, and I'm backing the Celtic way. We've got to come out fighting, and we've got to call out the media when it's needed. And it's needed this morning. So yeah, who would you rather, Celtic manager Brendan Rodgers or Stevie Clarke? As the vote for the poll this morning, make sure that you do vote, because I think it's a question that needs asked. Let's get back into the comments. Media calling Celtic a Europa team. What about the Buns getting scalped 4-1? Should have been 7-1. Exactly. In the Europa League. Exactly. There's no mention about them. Do you know? It's all dig at Celtic. Dig at Celtic. Richard Gordon, the face of BBC at one point. Is he still the face of BBC back home on radio? He goes on to say, Richard Gordon, not only have they rampaged through their domestic fixtures, winning all their games, but 2 or more goals, they are yet to concede in the league. In addition to their impressive previous European game 5-1 to Slovan Bratislava, but then their world came crushing down. That's what it says. Their world came crushing down. Well, the margin of loss might have come as a surprise, given that above, perhaps it should not, given Celtic's previous in the competition, and plenty of it. We dig at Celtic and been in the competition lots of years. The Parkhead club have now played 37 away group games in the Champions. How far back does that go? Come on. How far back does that go? 37 games when you're only playing 3 away games. He must be going back 20 years. Anybody could pull out stats. They've avoided defeats in 6 of those wins, only coming against Spartak Moscow in 2012 and Anderlecht in 2017. 11 of those losses have been 3 or more goals. Wow. And then it then goes on to the scorelines. 5-1 against Real Madrid. 6-0 against Barcelona. 7-1 against Atletico Madrid. PSG, Borussia Dortmund. And 7-0 in the new camp in 2016. That's the Doug drinking Hunters. I mean, this is a guy writing in a publication up in Aberdeen, the Press and Journal, having a complete dig at Celtic, going back many years. This is the same clown as Celtic have now conceded 100 goals in 37 matches. That's as it stands. It's staggering, minus 73. What the fuck? Christ, man, do you know what I mean? What's Scotland sitting at? What's your wee mate, Clarkey? What's Stevie doing? Stevie's one of the boys, isn't he? He's one of the lads. It's absolutely ridiculous that Celtic entertain the media. Celtic should just start saying, look, we're going to do a press conference. We're going to send us in your... Get back to the good old days during lockdown where there was no journalists inside Celtic Park. They had to sit on a screen and Brendan Rodgers could just go fucking mute. Because that's what I would do. And the headlines around about Scotland and online this morning are just ridiculous. And even going... And there's one publication that's coming out fighting. And that's and I'm not even going to mention it. But Brendan Rodgers defends tactics and insists that defeats are to be expected against the elite. I would say that's a reasonable headline because it's factual. We know that we can't go in and you're not going to... You're going to expect to lose to Real Madrid, to Atletico Madrid, in all reality, right? Unless you're living in some crazy world in Scottish football when you have this delusion of grandeur and you think that we're going to win 5 or 6. Somebody's voted for Stevie Clarke. Oh, they are amongst us. They are amongst us this morning. Yes, they are amongst us. Somebody's voted for Stevie Clarke rather than Brendan Rodgers. That manager that's lost 12 games in a row with Scotland, who played defensive football in absolutely woeful terms. Yep, somebody for a laugh has voted for Stevie Clarke. Get your votes in. Anyway, in the media call, I've done that one, Harry. If we get beat or even drop a point, it's crisis at Celtic. The media are pure pish. Yes, they are that. AR says the last Scotland game in the Euros was a sackable offence on its own. It was that. Carly says, let's see what they say about the Gers when Big Ange Spurs whipped them into double figures. I hope Ange puts out the best possible team and hits a cricket score. And hits a cricket score over them. But will they go? Will they have a dig at him about that, or will it be, oh, it's Big Ange, It's just Big Ange. Well, they come out with all the Big Ange love. They come out with all the Big Ange. He's a likeable guy. Do you know that's Big Ange? Never mind Clement. He's really rubbish. We know this. Anyway, they don't want Celtic to thrive. It's their beloved Sevco they adore. Yes, they know that. The Huns are UEFA conference team, but the media won't say that. Lancaster 82 says, we all know the outcome. It's definitely Brendan I'm voting for. Well, there's been 2%, 2 votes, 1 vote. Somebody's voted for Stevie Clark. They are amongst us. They walk amongst us. Yes, I see dead people. Alan Stevenson says, because Celtic, all of us have love in our bellies, jealousy. Yep. Peter Larkin says, I don't see any team complaining about the money that they get from Celtic when they qualify from the Champions League. Exactly. And teams were getting £300,000 or £400,000 this year for Celtic qualifying into these stages of the Champions League. Nobody's complaining about that, Paul. So yeah, thanks for shouting that out. When was the last time Aberdeen played in games in Europe? They had a good run a couple of seasons back in the Europa. Ange licking his lips, by the way. He's going to rip them apart. Yes. A shitey Man United will give them a pumping. Exactly. And Man United are terrible. What's going on with Ten Hag? I mean, Ten Hag, he was going to get sacked at the summer. He was not going to get sacked at the summer. And then he managed to save his job in the summer. And now they're wanting rid of him again. The Ten Hag story. I tell you, I wish I'd started the Man United channel. You've seen the views that they get. Anyway, United are waiting for the game to give them a taste of victory. They are. It'll probably be the only game that Man United win. Chris Boyd voted for Clark. Chris Boyd's probably in the building. 2% say Clark. Yep. Stevie Clark, for fuck's sake. I know. The Huns are saying Clark. More than likely, there's obviously one or two sneaked on and voting for Stevie Clark. Ten Hag is Baltimore's brother. Oh no. Anyway, that's the negative news headlines that are coming out in Scotland today. I just think it's funny that Richard Gordon and his mighty Aberdeen team. He then goes on. He says the simple truth is, and I've said this for years, Scottish football can no longer compete at the very highest level in the continental game. At best, we are a Europa League nation. There will be occasional victories, the one like Celtic enjoyed against Bratislava, and they will overcome lesser teams. There might be even the old vanquish of a big gun. They might have a night like Dortmund against Rangers a couple of years ago. That wasn't in the Champions League, that was the Europa. And Dortmund are very much a changed team since then. And as you see how he manages to take a piece of negativity against Celtic in plain sight, and then he has a little positive spin about Rangers right at the sort of middle of the article, and that's how the Scottish media act. I mean, it's amazing that he manages to do an article about Celtic and their Champions League stats, and then he turns it around to have a little positive spin. And this is a guy who's supposedly an Aberdeen fan, allegedly, but he works for the BBC, so we all know that it's the Hun Broadcasting Corporation. They might be they might have an off night like Dortmund. Oh Jesus. Anyway, it's unbelievable. And in the wake of Celtic's latest humbling, Brendan Rodgers made it clear he will not alter his approach of any kind in the Champions League test. If that's the case, it's folly. It will only lead to further capitulations and more embarrassing losses. Both he and his captain McGregor spoke of learning lessons in defeat. Those type of comments I've heard countless times from Celtic. Celtic have 3 more home games in the Champions League against Leipzig, Bruges and Young Boys. Those are winnable. And getting the points to progress is not beyond them. They will need to rethink when it comes to their travels. The next challenge is in Italy on the 23rd of October. And if Rodgers does not adopt a more pragmatic setup in Atalanta, who finished 4th in Serie A, where are Lille? Do you know what I mean? Lille sit 11th in the French League. And the French League, some say, is worse than the Scottish League. Because there's only really 2 teams that can win the French League. But here we go. There's what we are. There's what we're at with the Scottish media. And it looks like Cali Thistle are going to go bust because they need £1 million. Who cares? Anyway, let's jump back into the comments and see. Who's voting for Stevie Clark, you reprobates? Where's Paul Baird? Oh my God, honestly. Who would you rather as Celtic manager? Rodgers, who loses one game in Europe, or Stevie Clarke, who manages to lose 12 games in Europe and play a defensive style of football? Oh my God, they are amongst us this morning. Anyway, let's jump back into the Man United have already banked the 3 points. Yep. Chris Boyd's on this morning. I need coffee, says Carly. Sevco reckon they're the greatest European team in Scotland ever produced. Interesting that. They've never won the big cup. Interesting. And for a team that's only 12-year-old, that's some going. Types my breakfast. Jim. Pork Chop Express says, morning everyone. Andrew says, you've all got the munchies. Big Rabbi says the poll should be Clark for the next Rangers manager, and see how that poll gets on. No. Steve Clarke would be a great manager, says John. Really? Have you looked at his last 12 games in European football competition? Wow. John, are you serious about Stevie Clarke being a great manager for Celtic in a European sense? He's lost 12 games with Scotland. 12 games on the trot. 12 games in Europe. And you want him as manager? Really? There's no bigger test of a manager is international football. International football, some say, sits just above the Champions League. I think the Champions League sits above international football, personally, because it's a better competition. But Stevie Clarke has been absolutely... I put Stevie Clarke for the crack, says Big Rabbi. Oh my goodness. But I'm talking to John, because John says Stevie Clarke would be a great manager. And I think... wow. You would really, really, really like to see Stevie Clarke as Celtic manager going into Europe. That's some statement. Don't they know their deed? Yeah. And Pork Chop Express says Paul Baird sticks to his guns regarding Brendan. I can't believe he'd vote for Clarke. He's not came out and said this morning. I don't know if he's here. John Mullen's having a laugh, surely. Brendan Rodgers, top manager. When he leaves, we'll go hunting for an absolute peach of a manager. Yeah. Clarke for the Diet Huns job. Good morning, Pork Chop. Says Stephen Johnson. Carly says, Moby, never been to Amsterdam. What's missing? I'm going back to sleep after this. Stevie Clarke is amateurs compared to Brendan Rodgers. Exactly. I mean, what has Stevie Clarke done as manager? He had one good season where I'd rather have Kent Clarke. No, I wouldn't have him because he wears a blue and red cape. Can't have anybody with a blue and red cape coming into Celtic now, can we? Steve Clarke records in the Euros groups is non-existent. Exactly. He's terrible. But the reason we're talking about him is, if you missed the start of the video, the Scottish media are out to get Celtic in big numbers. Big numbers today from Richard Gordon saying that Celtic are absolutely wash. And Daily Record, do you think Celtic will qualify for the Champions League group? Will Brendan Rodgers have learned from his heavy defeat in Dortmund? They've got an article on that. Interesting one. I still think Celtic can qualify. Anyway, let's see what other Celtic news. Liam Scales was talking to the media yesterday. Liam Scales believes that Celtic aren't far away from being able to compete from complete. And he reckons that, look, you're going to get blips and stuff in Europe, but we're not far away from competing. What does he mean by competing? I think he means just... I want to forget about Europe. For the weekend. There's no point. And it's Saturday morning. This is why we're talking about it, because the media have got an agenda. Saturday morning, and they're all putting out. A lot of them are still putting out digs at Celtic, and it's maybe because Celtic don't play till tomorrow, and their beloved team plays tomorrow evening. That'll be a complete laugh. Graham Souness has even been getting on that, saying that the Celtic hammer-ins are a cruel reminder of how the game has evolved. Graham Souness talking about how the game's evolved, and he's thinking back to the glory days when he picked out a lot of English players. Now, this is where the delusional comes in to the South Korean historians, and thinking that they were able to go and hand-pick the likes of Gaza and Terry Butcher and everybody because Rangers was a great league to come and play in. It was no lies, wasn't it? English teams were banned from Europe at that time. And this is what a lot of younger fans might not realise. English teams were banned from Europe, and Rangers saw it as an easy way for these top players to continue playing in European football. So they managed to get Butchers and Gazas and all this crap. I mean, Gaza couldn't get a game in down south if he tried at that point. But they picked all these players up from England because they weren't getting European football. And that's the only reason they came to Rangers. To think it was anything more, to play for the mighty Gers that died, it's just an absolute claptrap. And it's funny how the media never mentions that either. The media never talks about the true narrative on how Rangers were managed to get these players. Oh, they paid more money. Yeah, well, we know that they didn't pay tax and all the rest of it. But anyway, Souness has been going on about the fact that it's been a sobering week for Scottish football. Remember how the game has evolved in a cruel way for both clubs. Both giants have suffered defeats. Oh my God, I don't care. I don't care. It's funny the way that they try to control the narrative. Anyway, let's check the votes. 90%. Come on, let's get it up to 100 votes to see how many people we have amongst us that actually vote for Rodgers as manager or Stevie Clarke. I'll jump back into the comments. I'd rather have Clint Clark. Stephen Johnson, have a great Saturday. Stevie Clarke's record in Euros is terrible. Kenny says, I wouldn't have Stevie Clarke as a kit man. Carly says, Paradise is starving. Port Shops. Stevie says, is good. The fact remains that Rodgers' record in the Champions League is abysmal, and he seems to never learn. Michael Ross, it might be abysmal, right? But would Stevie Clarke's be any better? Let's compare the two. Let's compare the last 12 games in Europe. Brendan Rodgers has a couple of wins. And you've got to take the last 12 games as a comparison. Brendan Rodgers has a couple of wins in Europe. Stevie Clarke has none. So do you want the Stevie Clarke type of football? And when everyone's talking about we need to be more pragmatic, we need to be defensive, well, look what happens with defensive football in the Scottish national team. I've just got to ask the questions. It's not about my perspective on it, but it's a question that needs to be asked, I think, and especially on a day that the Scottish media are having an absolute field day in slating Brendan Rodgers and Celtic this morning. Anyway, I'll move on from that. David says, we're never meant to beat Dortmund. We will still call... Well, we're never meant to beat Dortmund. Exactly. I said right at the beginning of the Champions League, we're not going to beat Dortmund. I said right at the start. Go back to the videos and you'll see me saying we'll never beat Dortmund and we'll struggle to beat the Italians because they were the final... They won the Europa last year. They're in the Champions League because they won the Europa. They get direct entry. It was always going. These two, they were going to be the two hard saves. Who's the 4%? If you haven't voted, we need 9 votes to get it up to 100 to find out exactly how many people. Who are the 4%? Name yourself. Who wants Stevie Clarke? 4% or 100 says 100. In other words, they cheated, Baz. Yeah, we all know they cheated, but that's just the way it is. I would rather hate Boris Johnson than Stevie Clarke. Joseph Docherty says, Morning, Baz. Brendan Rodgers has a point when he says that we can't change our game. We can't just switch it off. We have to defend better. Get Taylor as far away from the Euro games as possible and continue to improve our team. Greg Taylor is a man who has been getting plaudits a lot of this season, but he's a player that has been almost chased out of Celtic by the Celtic fans since 2020, almost when he came in. And certainly before Brendan Rodgers, when Ange Postecoglou came into the team, everyone was screaming to get rid of Greg Taylor then. That word pragmatic again, yep. Oh no. Michael Ross has a new favourite: haggis, neeps, and tatties. What? Baltimore or Clark for the Celtic job? Never. Hail all the Celtic fans, says Tony. You're the one mentioning Clark. Well, you've got to mention Clark. He's the only manager out there that seems to get away with anything. And the reason that I'm mentioning Clark is because he is a defensive style manager. He's a defensive set-up manager. People are crying out for Celtic to be more defensive. And the media, over the past 4 or 5 days, are in complete free-for-all having digs at Celtic. I'm looking at 4 articles in open tabs here this morning. But when it comes to the national manager and Stevie Clark, he doesn't get that. He doesn't get stick for the fans because the Tartan Army like him. Do you know what I mean? He got us to 2 competitions. See, we played shite in the competitions, but hey, he got us to 2 competitions. Celtic get a dirty tweet. We could be anyone in Europe. Hail Stephen, says Tony. Mr. Quinn's in love with Carly this morning. There we go. James Smith says our record in the Champions League is pish because we don't have proper defensive midfield for that role against better teams. Calmack gets picked off, and it's no fault as RODGERS for not signing a defensive midfield player. We let go of a cracking defensive midfielder, and I think the problem really is having. Do you remember that when we played in Europe under Martin O'Neill, and there was a thing at that time about can you play Paul Lambert and Neil Lennon together? Because there were similar type of players and there were defensive midfield players. And it worked pretty well for Celtic, playing Paul Lambert and Neil Lennon together at the same time. Do you know what I mean? So maybe we really need to get another defensive midfield player. 95 votes and it's went up to 5%. Come on. They're in amongst us. Jesus. Folk want Stevie Clark as manager. Oh my days. Oh my days. Oh my days. Either folk are on the wind up or they seriously want Stevie Clark as manager. I'm speechless to be fair. Vaya was meant to be the answer, but he was brought in too late. That's down to the board, says David. Yes, it is down to the board, bringing him in too late. We needed him in a lot earlier in the season. And it's not the time to talk about that because we've spoke about that in length at the beginning of the season. But we will talk about it after the Champions League campaign, because ultimately I think getting the players in early in pre-season gets the team set up. There's too many players still finding their feet at Celtic, and that's going against us. You could say, Lancaster says, you should take it, it's all news to me, I have no idea what you're talking about. Jed says, Morning Baz, we need to stick with the way that we're playing. The Dortmund game was like Bratislava game under Gordon Strachan. Whenever they went in, we lost 5-1. Exactly. I mean, they could have hit it could have came off somebody's arse in that game and went in. I mean, it was one of those nights where when a team's up for it, and Celtic have done it before. Celtic have done that and domestically, but it's just 11. Clark's pish, says Michael Ross. Oh, there are. Come on, I need 3 more votes because there's 5% of people. There's five of you out there that are either having a complete laugh or that actually want Stevie Clark back. Is Stevie Clark back? No, Stevie Clark is Celtic manager. He's never been back at Celtic. It would be back. No, he had one good season with Kilmarnock, and he stood at the end of the season and went, "Bye Rangers" in the middle of the pitch, and Celtic fans seem to have some kind of love with it. But it's complete madness. I made the name up 2 years ago, Carly. Lancaster. I have no idea what you're talking about. The boys have always had a swashbuckle approach. The fans demand it. We're a victim of our own approach. A victim of our own approach? I have no idea what's going on in the comment section. Right, come on. I need 2 votes to end this poll. And then, if you're one of the 5%, please stand up. Oh my God. Lancaster, are you lanky? Go to channel. Lanky, you changed your channel name. Why you changed it to Lancaster 82? Who knows? Don't think so. Anyway, right. It's no Lanky. I've checked his channel. It's no Lanky. So I'm just waiting to see 104 votes. Oh my god, there's five people here. There's five amongst us that are either having a complete laugh this Saturday morning, or they actually really do want Stevie Clarke as manager. It's bizarre. We'll be judged in January. That's what I think. I have said let's get through this campaign and let Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers is always going to be judged by his European results. We all know that he's a fantastic manager on a domestic level, and it looks like that we're going in the right direction once again to have a fantastic season under Brendan Rodgers, and one that we'll all look forward to. And when we start winning things and when we get closer to the 55, at the end of this season, the European campaign will all but be forgotten. But when we get into January and we still have a game left, Brendan Rodgers at that time will start to be judged on where we are in the league. The fact that you're going to need a minimum of 12 points to ultimately play an extra 2 games. You're not going to get into the last 16. I can't see Celtic getting into the last 16, but they'll go into a playoff position where they'll play a further 2 games to try and get further up the league format and then into the last 16. The teams that finish top 8 go straight into the last 16, and then the ones from 8 to 24 go into a playoff. It's always been the aim of Celtic to try and get into that playoff position. It's always been the aim to try and get into that position. If we don't get into the playoff position, people say it's been a disappointing season in the European context. That doesn't matter, because today the bus sets off. Yes, the Celtic team and the players all gather and get ready to head that nice little bus journey up to Inverness, where they'll be staying in a hotel this evening. And it's a fantastic little road trip, and they'll enjoy it and enjoy the scenery. I love the scenery heading up to Inverness and up to Dingwall. And it's even better getting the train up. Sometimes just get the train up and stay overnight at Inverness on the Saturday. Get Big Donald and his team that run the bus for Inverness Supporters Club to put on a night the night before, and it's usually a grand night. And then tomorrow we do play Ross County. It's going to be a difficult game. We are without Greg Taylor. We are without Cameron Carter-Vickers. We were hoping that we were going to have Cameron Carter-Vickers back for the game. God, there's more people coming in and voting on that. Jesus. Who are these people? Finish 24th with Europe and win the league, and the Huns will go through a miserable outcome, says AR. I think if we finish, and I think Celtic can still, we're currently sitting in 20th position. I think that we can realistically sit well above 24th position. If we could finish around about 15th to 16th, it'll be a fantastic season. And if we do get into the playoffs, it'll be a fantastic season. To get anything more than 4 points, realistically, should be applauded by Brendan Rodgers, because we've only managed 4 points in the last couple of seasons in Europe, and even though it is a new format, it is what it is. But it's back to the daily grind. The Celtic bus heads up to Inverness today. The Celtic fans head up tomorrow morning. Early start for a lot of the guys. 6:30 in the morning, getting their bus, getting their wee swally on the bus. No breakfast, because eating's cheating. Let's finish off this poll. We had 117 votes, and 118 votes, and 6% are having a complete and utter laugh this morning. Complete and utter laugh. We're going to end the poll, and let's see the 1% disappear from the... Why is the poll not coming up? And there we go. 5%. Jesus. Jim Johnson says our players will learn and better under pressure, playing better teams than the teams we play week in, week out. We stick what we're doing, and we'll get better under Brendan, under the bigger pressure. I think so. So who's Lanky now? Lanky's not even on the channel. Did someone mention Haggis and Hitatis? Oh no. The banter has just gone downhill dramatically. Tarmac says, anyone see that Bill Leckie video about the Huns could be facing a massive UEFA fine for letting off rockets. They could have the stand closed. Anyway, I'm going to jump back on after full-time results tonight just to see what the full-time results are and see what happened in the league. And a little preview of the game tomorrow. I like Palmer, bud, says Pork Chops. Fantastic. And 5% of Celtic fans on the vote today want Stevie Clarke as manager over Brendan Rodgers. When you put the two of them head-to-head over the last 12 European games, Stevie Clarke has lost his 12 European games playing a defensive style of football. And many people want Celtic to have a defensive style of football in Europe. Brendan Rodgers has fought back, and in Brendan Rodgers' last 12 games, he's actually won 2. Which is significantly more than Brendan Rodgers has, than Stevie Clarke has. Sorry. But Brendan Rodgers will not change his style for Europe. He won't change his style for Scottish football. And if he goes out and wins 4-0 tomorrow, playing fantastically sexy football, fast tacking a football, 4-3-3 formation, the fans will say, yes, that was brilliant. Or will they? And on that note, have an absolutely fantastic Celtic fans, wherever you are, all around the world.